Welcome back to Let's Talk to Animals, the podcast all species can enjoy together. And if you are watching the video version here over on YouTube, you're seeing one of my 4 interspecies family members, Miss Petal, climbing all over me. So when I say that, I mean it literally, and you may hear a little avian contribution here and there as we proceed throughout today's episode, which is this super fun topic that I absolutely love of soul contracts or soul agreements between humans and their animal companions. Of course, if you are a repeat listener here at Let's Talk to Animals, you have probably heard me tell the story more than once about how I went to go research the word pet. What does the word pet mean? And I dug back in the archives, as I'm kind of a wordy geek and I tend to do this. And I discovered that essentially the modern word pet derived from a root word that meant the possession of little consequence. And I was like, that's not how I describe my pets. I don't vibe with that. So being an animal communicator, I decided I was going to ask the animals, what does the word pet mean? Why do we use this word to describe you? And they said, oh, that's easy. We're your partners, empathic friends, and teachers. So it makes perfect sense that we would have soul agreements with our animal companions. It also makes perfect sense from a purely logistical point of view. The truth is, there are millions upon millions of humans living right now on this planet, and there are millions upon millions of animals. And if it was all left up to chance, how likely would it be that 2 souls who wanted and intended to meet here on the 3D Earth plane could easily find one another or find one another at all? So we have soul agreements. Now, this can be a little bit of a controversial topic. I will acknowledge that not everyone in my field, the field of interspecies communication, believes that all animals that are living with humans have a soul agreement with that human. And not all communicators believe that soul contracts exist. So there are many different schools of thought, theories, hypotheses out there. I like to keep an open mind, recognize I'm always learning. The animals are my teachers. So I don't really take my guidance from other humans. I'm always interested in what my colleagues have to share and others have to share. And I always like to run anything I may learn by the animals that I talk with and see what they have to say on the subject. For me, the buck kind of stops with them. And so that's the perspective that you're getting here on Let's Talk to Animals. And because the pets have told me that they are our partners, empathic friends, and teachers, and because we have a little overcrowding problem here on Earth, it would make sense on every level, and the pets reinforce this, that we find one another on purpose. And when we're still at the soul level, we even rehearse the ways in which we will recognize one another once we're in our bodies. And that is my foundational definition of a soul contract or a soul agreement. And I use those words pretty interchangeably. I prefer the word soul agreement because it just sounds gentler, and I like that. But these 2 words to me aren't in conflict. And so when we're looking at a soul agreement on its simplest level, it's an agreement to meet. It's saying, yes, I want to spend some time with you, or I agree to spend some time with you when we are both embodied. And in the last episode where we were tackling the very tough, very emotional, very dense topic of why animals that are so beautiful and such perfect souls would choose, whatever, willingly take on the request to spend time with human animals that might harm them, we look to this soul agreement for further insight, because an animal might not want to spend time with a particular human, but they might be willing to on behalf of that human soul's potential for evolution. And here again, we come to the earth plane, the 3D plane, we have free will. So there's never any guarantee, which is another reason I like the word soul agreement better than soul contract, because we might get here and change our mind. And that is part of free will. And we might, as one of my colleagues shares, end up in the wrong mailbox for a while. That too is part of the learning and growth process that is unique to this 3D Earth embodied plane. But we may also find that an animal agrees for the purposes of the potential for a human soul's evolution to undergo a period of discomfort in their company, hoping that the outcome will be for the highest and best good of all. That is a true high service. That is a true perfected heart agreeing to that kind of situation. And that awes me and fills me with humility and wonder and gratitude and a recognition that our species, and myself included, we have a long way to go to evolve to that level. What a beautiful gift. But in this episode, I'm going to walk you through the major categories of soul agreements. I've separated them out into 8 loose categories. As I survey my field, I find that most of us seem to be in agreement. Those of us who affirm that soul contracts or soul agreements are a thing, we believe in them or we have experienced them. For me, when I use the word belief, I'm really talking about I've had personal experience that my doubting left brain mind cannot overcome in any effective way. So it's been codified into a form of truth for me. So those of us in the field who affirm that soul agreements are a thing, that they happen, that they're mutual, and that they have purpose and meaning for both participants, you'll find these general categories are pretty standard. They may not have the same names. You may find that other communicators call these soul agreements by different names, and that's absolutely fine, but it's more the flavor or the vibe of the relationship itself that I want you to focus on. That's my intention for offering this episode today, is to give you a flavor and maybe help you start to do a little detective work with your own animal or animals in your interspecies family, and maybe start to notice, get curious, wonder about all these basic tenets of animal communication, at least the way I teach it. Try on some of these different soul agreements for size and see which one seems to fit best. And of course, this is something that I always cover if we have time in an animal communication session, or if it's a priority of yours, we definitely cover it. So if you're curious and you want to know what your animal has to say about the soul agreement that you share with them, well, I'd love to work with you. You can find me over at animallovelanguages.com/connect, and we can find out from your animal's point of view why they have chosen to keep company with you, what your spiritual lesson or work together is, and the nature of your soul agreement. Love those kinds of sessions. They are so fun for me too. So, number 1, the first type of soul agreement that I see frequently. And again, all of this information is sourced from the animals. This is not me up in my head thinking about it. It's all arising from the different sessions that I've done over the years and the common themes that have emerged along the way. So the very first one is what I call the parent-child or the child-parent. And this means this type of soul agreement typically is pretty easy to spot when you hear the pet parent talking about their pet as if they're a child. They're using a lot of baby talk. They are...
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Shannon Cutts. I'm an animal sensitive and intuitive, a Reiki master practitioner, and an animal communication teacher with animallovelanguages.com. Some of my areas of specialization include highly sensitive pets, anxious pets, pets in spirit, pet reincarnation, and an exploration of the deep soul contract bond that you share with your pet. For more information about my one-to-one private pet parent sessions for you and your pets, my Reiki and energy balancing sessions for pets, my signature animal communication adventure flagship program for students, and my ongoing animal communication adventure practice circle for students and graduates, you can visit me anytime at animallovelanguages.com. Looking forward to meeting you and your pet, and I send you all my love. referring to their son or daughter. It's a very interesting one because here there is a recognition of caregiving in one direction or the other, and it flows both ways. For instance, with a parent-child soul agreement, I had a session with a man and his two dogs last week, and he flat out referred to them as his son and daughter. That's an easy one to spot. I said, "You have the soul agreement of parent-child." And he said, "Yes, I do. And that's the one I want." And I loved that. I thought that was really cool. And this is a man who has a lot to give, and he is an excellent dog dad. He's fabulous. So I was very pleased that everyone in that family was very pleased with this dynamic. I have another client whose dog recently passed into spirit. And in this particular case, the dog was the parent and she was the child. And you can see this a lot with emotional support animals, with service animals, especially service animals for emotional type disorders, even neurological disorders, mystery disorders that tend to be chronic in nature. You can also see this in animals that work as therapy dogs, especially with children. In fact, the dachshund that we had before this one volunteered as a reading dog for kids. The kids that won't read for their parent because they're embarrassed or they have trouble forming the words or dyslexia or something else going on, they'll read for the dog. So the animal is standing in for the parent in this case and helping the child practice their reading. So we can have parent-child or we can have child-parent, and it can be a very all-consuming soul agreement. Another type of soul contract that's also family-based is siblings. Siblings is very interesting, especially depending on the nature of the bond or lack thereof that we may have as pet parents with our own human siblings. In some cases, the animal is perhaps a stand-in for the sibling that they never had. And in other cases, the animal is the upgraded version of the sibling they wish they'd had. And in many cases, the sibling is simply like a wingman or a wingwoman, somebody that you have a healthy bond with, you have fun with, you share things with. You sometimes it can be like partners in crime together where we're going on adventures and maybe even getting into a little trouble together. There can be some disagreements, some things to work out. So this is typical sibling behavior. It's a very equal and overall balanced relationship. So you'll see maybe some jockeying for position, maybe a little competitiveness. Many animals who partner with their people in sports that take a lot for both the human and their animal to participate in, you will see more of this sibling relationship. Yes, isn't that right, my love? The third soul agreement that I see quite often is partners. Now, partners doesn't always mean romantic, although that is definitely present. And of course, this is a G-rated channel. And so when I say romantic, we are again talking about the flavor and the essence of that deep soul connection. We are very bonded. We are equals. And there is a deeper level of commitment often than the pet parent has typically experienced with other human animals in their life to date. So in a way, it can be like the partner they wish they had. Again, similar to siblings or the upgrade to the partner they do have. Sometimes if there is another partner, a human partner in the mix, you will see some resource guarding by the pet of their favorite human, their partner. And I should stop here and mention that you can have more than one type, because you may be listening to this going, well, I think I'm all of them. So we're not looking for you're only one and all the others don't apply. We're looking for the strongest essence or flavor, the one that you hear it and you're like, that is us. So it's not that there aren't elements of these other soul agreements also present. For instance, my Petal she's very protective of me. And she's very jealous when my other pets or other humans or anyone really gets in between me and her. Anyone else in the house can leave. She doesn't get bothered by it. If I make even a step towards the door, she utters a particular kind of shriek that basically means, where the heck do you think you're going? And the other interesting thing about partners is that there's a lot of leeway there because, of course, to keep a partnership healthy, to keep a partnership, period, we have to really grow our tolerance. We have to really grow our patience, and we have to really grow our perspective and really become willing to take a walk in the other being's shoes or paws or wings in our case, and try on their perspective for size. Sometimes a partnership can be a little uncomfortable because there's mirroring going on, and it's not optional to take a look at it. If we don't look at the mirroring that's going on between ourselves and our partner of any species, we're going to get stuck in that place until we do. So perhaps the mirroring is a health issue. I have this with my tortoise, Malty. She had early life metabolic bone disease that arose because of some really bad choices I made in her veterinary care when she had a respiratory infection, and it just snowballed from there. And before I knew it, she was at death's door. And it has really affected her in her spine, specifically in what we would call the mid to low back, so the lumbar region. It's left her with scoliosis and density where it shouldn't be. Well, guess who was just diagnosed with 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 herniated discs and mild scoliosis in her lumbar spine? That would be me. And so sometimes you see this mirroring. And what does it mean? I have my theories that would take us off on a tangent. And so I won't go into it here, but there has been mirroring. And I have become more and more willing to look at that as the years have passed. And it's an interesting journey, a very, very interesting journey. There's also with partners, there tends to be more of a trust there, or there should be. That's what I don't love the word should, but that's what we're aiming towards. So you do you, I do me. And what we're trusting in is that we desire to be together with one another. And we desire each other's company more than the company of someone else who might replace us or replace them. And so there is a bit more autonomy that you see with these types of soul agreements, where it really does represent an equality of adulthood. Now, coworkers or boss and employee. I did a session 2 weeks ago for a beautiful little parrotlet who had passed into spirit. And when I started talking about their soul agreement together, I said, I can tell that you are not parent and child, and you don't feel like partners. I think you're more like colleagues, like co-conspirators, or even boss and employee. And she said, I was so hoping you weren't going to say parent and child, because we're nothing like that. She's the boss. Turns out this pet parent is a professor who teaches mostly on Zoom, as so much of education is conducted these days, and that her parrotlet had the habit of sitting on top, right in the middle of her head during her Zoom lectures, to the point where all of her students called this bird her boss. So not only did we nail that one, but she was very clear about what type of soul agreement she and her bird shared together. And that is very cool when that happens. Now, the next type of soul agreement category is the friends. And friends, it's a little bit of a looser soul contract. Friendship, it persists. And there's different categories of friendship. But when we look at friendship in this context, we look at friendship with daily contact, but friendship that is tolerant of minor issues, because you build up that trust over time. A friend is someone that you trust. A friend is someone that you can rely on. A friend is someone who is there for you, and vice versa. A friend is someone who will listen to you with empathy and compassion. A friend is someone who will do favors for you and cut you a little slack when you're having a bad day. And a friend is also someone who has their own limits and their own life. And that can be very interesting. Often when we find there's an animal who is really incarnated to be with another animal in your family, or even an animal that lives down the street from you, and that's their partnership soul contract. or their parent-child soul contract or their siblings' soul contract, but they also have a soul contract with you. And it's one of equality in friendship. So often when I have pet sessions and an animal points out that they're very bonded with a specific other animal in the family. And here I'm thinking of a dog who passed and kept turning my attention to a horse in the pet parent's family who was still embodied. And these two were so bonded. They were partners. And this dog would even do occasional soul walk-ins, just brief soul check-ins through this horse's body. And the pet parent told me, I can see him staring at me out through my horse's eyes. And she had 3 horses. She had 2 other dogs. It was this one particular horse that he highlighted. And he even told me the horse's name. And when I told her this, she said, "You're exactly right." And I instinctively, when I'm really missing this dog, I go out and I place my hands on my horse near his heart area. And sometimes I would swear I see my dog's eyes mirrored in my horse's eyes. And of course, I'm withholding names to protect privacy here, but I have never forgotten this experience. So it's also so intriguing. And we'd be here for 4 hours if we were talking about all the nuances of an interspecies family with the different soul contracts that can be in place. And so it can be something that you consider because these same basic archetypes generally translate very well to soul agreements between 2 non-human animals. 2 non-human animals in your family. Maybe there's a non-human animal you haven't even added to your family yet, who has a very strong soul agreement with an animal that is currently in your family. Sometimes when I see animals where a pet parent was going to adopt 1 animal and came home with 2 or even 3, that represents a very strong existing soul agreement with those other animals. This happens a lot with cats. And I've had a few dogs recently tell me, "I want to bring my sister back with me." When I'm working with pet parents to call their pet back through pet reincarnation and the joyful reunion, it's always interesting to ask, well, are you coming back by yourself? Are you coming back with someone? Is there someone else in the pet parent's family that you're coming back to be with as well? To explore those deeper nuances of the soul agreements that our animals can have with one another, as well as with us. Now, this next category, the archetype, I call frenemies. So this is, I know we're supposed to be together. I feel it in my gut, or there were very clear signs. But when we actually get about the discipline of sharing time together day in and day out, there are moments of, have we met? Like, what the heck? And here, the best way to describe a frenemy type of soul agreement is, have you ever had a conversation with someone and you know that you have a lot in common? And you know that you're interested in the same basic types of things. And you know that you share a particular passion or heart for something or someone in particular. And yet when you go to talk with them, it just isn't flowing. And you really don't know why. And you know they're a good person, and you know that they have a great heart, and you know that you really just have a lot of synchronicities, but the energy doesn't feel seamless. These are growing relationships. You could almost consider them a subset of the teacher-student soul agreement that we haven't talked about yet, but the relationship itself is the teacher, and you are both the students in this soul agreement archetype. So when you have a frenemy soul agreement, you know you've got your work cut out for you. You're being asked to try on a different perspective than what comes natural to you. You're being asked to flow with an energetic vibration that doesn't feel as natural to you. Maybe you are a sedentary person and you have a lot of allergies and you don't really like to be outdoors. And then you find out that your new dog or cat or horse, who seems so placid and calm, is just a bundle of energy and needs to be outdoors and running around all the time. And nothing in you was prepared for that. And you've got to make a lot of adjustments. Or maybe you were hoping for a really active companion animal, and the one you choose, this is the key, because it's not the one you get, it's the one that you choose, turns out to not have much interest in the kinds of things that maybe you even really enjoyed with your last pet. So these are invitations to try on a different way of life for size. There can be a lot of modeling in these soul agreements as well as mirroring. And when I say modeling, I mean one party, one of the two of you, is at one extreme, and the other party, the other one of you, is at the other extreme. And the invitation here typically is to try to meet in the middle and make some adjustments. So when there are extremes of behavior, that leads to imbalance over time, health, in quality of life, and relationships, and work, and all kinds of areas of life. And so there's often the invitation to moderate. With mirroring, it's more of when you do something, I do it too. Or for me and my tortoise Maltese, as I described, there's a mirroring where we're coming down with similar health issues. And then there's an invitation to unpack the wisdom in that. So there can be all kinds of nuances. And this is definitely a great topic to explore in an animal communication session, especially if you find that this is happening and you're like, I can't really ignore it, but I also can't put my finger on why or what's going on here. And so this is something we can dive into in a session with your animal if you are curious and you want to learn more about this. But frenemies are almost a subtype of teacher-student or student-teacher, where the relationship, the bond itself, is teaching you both. It just flows that our seventh soul agreement type is, in fact, teacher-student or student-teacher. And many times what we'll see here is maybe a pet parent who's never had the particular species of animal before, and they're learning. This might be a first-time dog owner who comes to me and they don't know dog behavior. So they actually don't even know what's normal, what's healthy, what's not. There's a huge learning curve. These can be animals who are working actively in service alongside humans. So when I shared that our previous dachshund, JP Morgan, was a teacher, essentially a reading teacher, and definitely a mentor and a coach for kids, for students. And he was serving in that role. And of course, in order for him to serve in that role, my mom had to learn a whole bunch of new stuff and protocols and take him through training classes and get him certified. So there was quite a bit of learning, quite a bit of teaching going on for them both, and quite a lot of learning. These roles can also flip-flop. Sometimes you'll see the student teacher, and that's where the human is learning so much from their animal. And the best example I can think of from my recent past caseload is the pet parent who came to me, who turned out to be so very anxious, but she thought it was her cat who was very anxious. And when I tuned in with her cat, who actually turned out to be super chill and really calm, he told me that he was mirroring, trying to teach his person how to regulate her vibration, how to change her state. And you'll see sometimes in the case of cats, you'll see a cat who will come and sit on their person. Isn't that right, Petal? Or a bird, right? Who will come and sit on their person. And that person inexplicably suddenly feels calmer, especially if that cat is purring. Well, that's better than any anti-anxiety med you could ever find, right? If you've ever experienced that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we have the animal who is attempting to teach their person how to live a calmer life. We can have the reverse, where we have a naturally calm human who adopts a pet who is more anxious. And so that pet is then benefiting from the human's toolkit, for instance. And I'll use our current dachshund, Flash Gordon, as an example. And Flash has been through quite a bit in his young life. He's now 9, but he had quite a bit of trauma, even during his birthing process, and certainly in the first 2 years of his life. And I have a pretty robust toolkit of anti-anxiety helps. And so I've been doing a lot of work with him. I've been doing energy work. I've been doing tapping, EFT tapping. We've used aromatherapy with him. He's getting body work. There's all kinds of stuff that I can offer to him to help him achieve and maintain calm. So those are just some general examples that you can use to kind of take a look at your soul agreement and say, I wonder if that fits. And then finally, this one is the most intriguing to me in the sense of I feel like I'm learning exponentially about this type of soul contract at the moment. This is what the animals seem to really be overemphasizing even in my learning journey as a communicator and as a pet reincarnation expert. And that is the soul agreement of soulmates. And I have had 2 animal soulmates, and I share much more brass tacks details about each one of them in other episodes last season on the podcast. You can find stories about Petal, who is my soulbird Pearl reincarnated, and you could find stories in a 2-parter actually about my box turtle Bruce, who did a soul walk-in, a surprise, totally unexpected soul walk-in to come back into the body of my 3-year-old box turtle, Io. So I've had 2 very dramatic experiences of animal soulmates. And typically what I find here is that the soulmate soul agreement is so powerful and the bond is so deep that typically this is not the first time that you and your pet have been together when we're dealing with a soulmate soul agreement. And when the animal transitions out of their body, which typically they're going to leave first. For most animals, they're going to leave first. For Bruce, of course, box turtles can live anywhere from 50 to 100 years, depending on their health and environment and quality of life, et cetera, and the husbandry. I never really knew because Bruce was a feral rescue to me. I never really knew how old he was. And I found out he passed in a communication earlier this year. And so actually, he could have outlived me. But in most cases, our animals will pass first, because typically their lifespans are not as potentially long as ours. And so when an animal does pass and you have a soulmate soul agreement, the grief is catastrophic. I had a pet parent this past week who told me that she went to the ER when her soul dog passed. She thought she was having a heart attack. And heartbreak syndrome is very, very real. If you're not familiar, you can look it up and research it. But when my soulbird Pearl passed, even though he told me that very same day exactly what his plans were to reincarnate and gave me the clues to look for to find him again, I didn't want to live and I didn't work very much for the first half of that year. And considering that I'm a professional communicator and teacher, that was a tough year. So this can be very catastrophic when we lose our soulmate. And at the deepest level, and again, with soulmates, there can be nuances depending on how many times we've been together and the nature of our life together in this particular incarnation and just all the different moving parts that comprise a life in progress. At the very deepest level, you find the twin flame soulmate. And this is a new discovery for me. And it arose when my Pearl passed about 2 years ago. And I asked him, because this is the 4th time as Petal, this is the 4th time he's come back to me in this lifetime alone. And again, I share that story in a different episode. But I asked him, is a twin flame soul agreement possible? And his response was something along the lines of, duh. So then I asked the animal collective, I said, can you confirm that twin flames, and by this I mean the same energy in 2 separate bodies? Even for pet reincarnation, I am already on the fringes of my field and we're really pushing it here. But what they showed me was what looked like a comet streaking towards Earth, this bright ball of life with a little light tail streaking towards Earth. And just before this light ball enters Earth's atmosphere, a little tiny baby comet cuts off from the main ball of light, forms into a mini version. And when they enter Earth's atmosphere, they enter into 2 different bodies. So the answer that I got was yes, twin flame soulmate soul agreements are real. And this is why they feel so deep and so intense. This is why it is almost unlivable when they pass out of their bodies, when we don't have that physical contact, even though with our head brain, we can logically say, well, they're not their body. It's so catastrophic. What I call the grief firestorm is so epic. And there's so much that can be said about that it would fill up a whole other episode. So I won't let myself go there. But twin flame soulmate soul agreements are profoundly transformative. And when you have one, it's because you're being invited to step forward because your soul already wants to evolve. You're being beckoned forward into a true life upheaval, life-changing awakening, a soul awakening and transformation. And it's not to be wished for. It's like, oh, that's so romantic. Twin flames, the concept of a muse, a life mate. It's unthinkable for one to be without the other. It's not to be wished for lightly. It can be very intense, all consuming. In the case of my Pearl and I, we worked together. We wrote a book together. We ran a blog together. He introduced me to animal communication. He has transformed my entire life. And there is no area of my life where he did not have an impact. He helped me identify relationships that weren't working for me. My longtime partner, he just didn't have any feelings for birds, for Pearl. And guess who I chose? So there are so many transformations, and often we are confronted with choices with this type of a very intense, very deep, often multi-incarnation, multi-lifetime twin flame soul agreement, soul contract. So those are the 8 basic archetypal categories that I wanted to share with you in this episode. I would love to hear, did I miss any of the ones that you're familiar with, or perhaps you're familiar with them, but they have a different name in your world? Are you undecided between 2 or more different soul contracts? Which one seems or feels to be the strongest, or the one that just caught your attention? Maybe you weren't even thinking that was your soul contract or your soul agreement with your pet, but when I started talking about it, you were like, ding, ding, ding. Maybe you have no idea. Maybe you have questions that haven't been answered and you want me to do another episode to unpack this further because there's lots more to share. Let me know. Post a comment. Ask your questions. I definitely shape these episodes based on what listeners like you and what my pet parent clients and my animal communication students are interested in learning about. So let me know, and I can craft an episode for you. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your time to listen to this podcast episode. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave us a 5-star review. It makes my day, and it helps our little podcast hold its own in the greater podcastosphere, which is so jam-packed these days. It helps other pet parents who are interested in what we talk about here to find us. And it warms my heart to know you're out there, you love animals like I do, and you're interested in animal communication. So to you, dear treasured listener, I send all my love. And please do check back in 2 weeks. If you're not on my weekly love letter mailing list yet, head over to animallovelanguages.com and you'll see a little pop-up, and that will get you $25 off your first animal communication session with me. And you will get notifications every time I drop a new podcast episode. So that's a win-win, right? As well as access to a number of wonderful freebies, including but not limited to emotional freedom technique tapping for pets and their people, Anxious No More, a pet parent's guide to pet anxiety in this modern age, the pet reincarnation support guide, welcoming your pet back through joyful reunion, the pet parent grief support guide with a list of curated grief-focused podcast episodes that I recommend, and so much more. So check all those out, animallovelanguages.com. And I look forward to welcoming you back to Let's Talk to Animals again very soon. Okay, all my love. Bye for now.